I'm Roy Baldridge, President of LACNIP, and that's the Lima Allen County Neighborhoods in Partnership. And we're here tonight for this debate. LACNIP, of course, is an organization that is the umbrella for the neighborhood associations in our community. And community is very important, and that's one of the reasons why all of you are here tonight. It reminds me of the events that have been happening in Texas and in Florida and other states, and neighborhoods and neighbors have had to come together and help one another and work together to face all sorts of adversity. And like that, we're here in our own way to think about community. I want to thank Reverend Pastor Mike Hughes, the pastor of St. Luke's Church, for making this facility available to us this evening. I want to thank our candidates, Mayor Berger and Mr. Cheney, for agreeing to participate in the event. I want to thank John Schneider and Bob Freeman, the co-chairs of this event, and they've done a very fine job getting it organized and making it possible, as evidenced by the large crowd of people that we have here this evening. We are videotaping this debate, and it will be available on YouTube. It'll also be available on LACNIP's Facebook page, and there will be a link on our website to the YouTube presentation. So that's all in the works. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator. He will explain the debate rules and the procedures. He is the Director of Workforce Development Board of Auglaize, Hardin, Mercer, and Van Wert counties. And we are very fortunate to have Dr. Matthew Kinkley as our moderator this evening. Dr. Kinkley.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Great to see such a great turnout for tonight's forum. As we begin the process, we're going to talk about some of the rules that we've established and had conversation about previously. As you know, our incumbent is Dave Berger, and our challenger is Keith Cheney. We are set for about an hour and a half. It may go a bit longer or a bit shorter, depending on the engagement tonight. We flipped a coin earlier to determine who would take the first question, and it will be Mr. Berger. There will be about 7:20. I'll finish the questions that I have behind me, or we will stop about that time. I don't know how many questions we're actually going to get through during that time. It could be shorter or longer, depending on the candidates' responses in the time period. And at that point, we'll have a closing 2-minute conversation from each candidate, and based on the process that we're using, rotating who gets the next question, that will also determine at the end who answers first for their closing statement. I have been known to make mistakes from time to time in terms of tracking who gets the next question, so I ask you to bear with me a little bit and get me on track if you notice that I've erred, all right? Appreciate that. Each question will have 2 minutes to answer, and then there will be a 1-minute rebuttal. Our timekeeper this evening is Terry Saloni of the Lima Allen County Chamber, and just a recognition that October 4th there'll be another event held by the Chamber for further exploration of the candidates. And there will, as I said earlier, be a closing 2-minute summary by each candidate. Questions have been received from the floor and screened at this point by me to be able to be responded by both candidates. Without further direction, we will get started. Since we are part of the neighborhood association this evening, and we're here celebrating neighborhoods and the conversation that is with them. The first question will be, what do you see the city's role with the neighborhood association?
Well, good evening, everyone. It's good to be here tonight. We appreciate the work of the sponsor, LACNIP, along with the generosity of St. Luke's for making this venue possible. It's been my view that neighborhood associations and the Association of Neighborhood Associations has been a terrific asset for our community, stretching back almost 30 years. Without LACNIP, without the neighborhood associations, literally thousands of man-hours of work would not be done in our community. Instead, we have a series of ongoing activities that have happened, everything from neighborhood cleanups to festivals to focus on community safety. All that is happening because of the leadership and the caring attitudes of people in our neighborhoods. So the city's role in this is to foster the ongoing efforts of these organizations. We do that in practical ways. For example, recently we had a mini grant program to assist with the activities proposed by individual neighborhood associations. We also, with neighborhood staff at the city, partner with LACNIP and the individual associations to plan and execute ongoing activities. So in my view, it's essential that we maintain that partnership in order to make sure that our neighborhoods continue to thrive and that we create communities in individual areas of our town that truly are caring for one another and for the residents who may not be a part of the association but are definitely part of the neighborhood.
You know, the city's participation is vitally important as we grow our neighborhoods. But more importantly is the substandard condition of many of our neighborhoods throughout this city. At one time, we had 7 or 8 neighborhood associations. Today, we have 4. We need to build them up into every sector of our city and then give them the tools of which we can work with them to foster the improvements of our neighborhoods, starting with the housing, all the way to property maintenance. And I attended events that's been hosted by the Northside Neighborhood Association just a few weeks ago. My wife and I did. What a wonderful event. Opportunity to meet probably 150 to 200 residents that thoroughly enjoyed that time to be together and the opportunity to together. So I certainly not only want to continue to support, but expand the support of our neighborhood associations to make them more productive and to increase the number of them throughout our city.
Mr. Berger?
I'll just point out that I've been a member of what's called the U.S. Conference of Mayors for a number of years, and through that organization about a year and a half ago, we were successful in applying for a special grant, $100,000 that we were able to bring back to our community for specifically our neighborhood associations and for a focus on community gardens as well as hydroponics. So our efforts with the neighborhood associations are creative, they're engaging. I believe we're investing directly in the kinds of interests that our neighborhoods have, and we will continue to do that.
Keith?
It's fine.
Okay. So our next question, since you both are vying for the top leadership position in our community, tell us what you believe are the 3 key attributes to being a good leader and describe in detail at least one of those attributes related to yourself and why you possess it.
Well, I think communication is certainly a vital asset, as well as leadership and the ability to work well with others. Obviously, the mayor is the chief executive officer of the city. I've served in the business world as the chief operating officer of one of the largest Midwest convenience store chains, and successfully was able to guide that company even through the times that were tough. The recession, we still showed positive growth sales. When you take that kind of leadership and you bring it to a city that, is starving for not only leadership, but for communication. I look at city council, for example, and there are numerous city councilors that they're basically just not welcome in the mayor's office. That has to change, and it will change. I will have an open door policy without exception, because there again, we have to be able to communicate. And it goes the same thing for our citizens. I want our citizens to feel welcome, to feel they have the ability to come up and talk to me and to bring forth their ideas to grow our city and to make things better for Lima.
My feeling about what the three essential characteristics are for the mayor is a focus on problem solving, a focus on team building, and a focus on being practical. And I think that kind of leadership is what has in fact made a real difference in our community for the past 28 years. When I look back to when I first took office, we were very much still suffering from Rust Belt economics. We had plant closings everywhere, and we were continuing to experience that in the first couple of terms that I was in office. But by fighting every day for our community, by fighting for the business enterprises that were already here, but also working with others to create our economic development organizations and programs, we've been able to attract businesses, and we've been able to build our economy into what is the best economy in over 40 years. That didn't just happen. There was no magic bullet. It took lots of hard work, lots of people teaming together in order to make that take place. When it comes to relationships, they are in fact two-way. And there are some folks on city council who frankly don't want to work with me. And I want to make it clear, Mr. Cheney has done his utmost in this election to be negative, to diminish our community, and to ultimately play to people's fears. This issue of not being able to get along with city council members truly is about who wants to work together with the administration in order to get things done.
Thank you.
You know, that's interesting, Mayor, that you would say that I've been negative. That just humors me, quite honestly and frankly, because what you have done throughout this campaign, using the Memorial Day parade, saying I didn't follow the rules, when in fact I did, and even the chairman of the parade said I did. And look, you're not communicating with city council. That happened many, many years before I decided to seek the office of mayor of Lima. We had another individual in the primary, Councilor Derry Glenn, who's been on city council for nearly 20 years. And if you remember, his exact statement was that he has not communicated with you probably more than 5 times in all those years. So let's not lay that at the doorstep of Keith Cheney. I have the ability of bringing people together. I have the ability of communicating. And you also mentioned economics. And somewhere you're coming up with the best economy in 40 years. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me give you a fact. The United States Census Bureau, in 1990, Lima had a 21% poverty level. In 2016, they had a poverty level of 32%. Ladies and gentlemen, that's 1 out of every 3 people. That's not a thriving economy.
Mr. Cheney, we're going to do the rebuttal for the mayor.
The fact is, Mr. Cheney, you do break the rules all the time. You broke the rules in the Memorial Day parade. You even broke the rules in the Labor Day parade. You didn't respect labor in that parade. You said nothing. You didn't attend the opening ceremony, and you had nothing to say about the importance of organized labor in our community. The issue of the strength of our economy has to be measured by the job creation that is underway. Every business in our town is growing. Folks in industrial businesses, in the medical field, in education, the growth is terrific. And we have, for over 18 months now, had a surplus of jobs, 1,500 jobs at any given time, 2/3 of which are good jobs with good wages and benefits.
Thank you. We'll go on to our third question, and this will be directed to Mr. Berger. Specifically, tell us what role you believe the mayor has in creating jobs, and describe at least 3 things you will do to bring jobs to Lima.
Well, my role since being mayor has been to, in fact, team with the business community in order to create and sustain our economic development organization, the Allen Economic Development Group. I helped design that organization, and I've been a part of that board for the last 25 years. I actively work on projects with that organization and staff. The kinds of things that we do together are to, in fact, defend existing industry. That's how we've maintained the JSMC and the 3 threatened closures of the tank plant. That's how we've been able to maintain the refinery and now see it grow and prosper into an absolutely phenomenal set of businesses that are going to be here for the next 50 years. The kinds of things that we're now doing to assist with workforce are focused on making sure that people are aware that these jobs or opportunities are available, but also bringing training resources to those that need them and removing barriers for others. Recently we announced, for example, the opportunity for a transportation system that will provide transportation to those from throughout the county that need reliable transportation in order to be able to get to jobs, to get to education, and to get to medical appointments. So those are all things that I'm intimately involved in. I have been and I will continue to be helping to foster the growth of our economy and the businesses that are here.
Mr. Cheney?
Sir, Berger, you continue to tout the 1,500 jobs that are available. Those 1,500 jobs are not in the city of Lima. They are in a 10-mile radius circle is where those jobs are, number one. Number two, while you'd like to take credit for inventing and participating, I hold in my hand the Work Enforcement Board monthly meeting records starting in December of 2015, of which you're a member of that board. That board consists of the owners of businesses that created the jobs that we speak about. It also has personnel on the board from Ohio Means Jobs, and it has political elected officials. Your attendance record is zero. If you truthfully cared about those jobs, you would participate. I believe that one thing we have to do is become a business-friendly city. We currently are not. Talk to contractors. Talk to business individuals that have tried to do business in Lima. We currently operate business at the speed of government. When I'm elected, we will operate government at the speed of business. That's how you encourage development. That's how you encourage growth. You become friendly to businesses, not stifle them and hold them at bay.
Mr. Berger?
There are 1,500 jobs in a 10-mile radius of Lima. That's a change. And that is a positive change that we all ought to appreciate. The fact that people don't have those jobs inside the city, I wish they were in the city, but the fact is that they're in our community. And so has my work also been focused on our community as a whole, not just on the city. The JSMC is not in the city. The refinery is not in the city. Ford Motor is not in the city. Dana is not in the city. And I don't ignore them. I partner with them in order to make certain that they thrive and that they, in fact, are here for the long term. The Workforce Investment Board has not been something that I've spent any time on. That's true. But I have, in fact, fostered other kinds of opportunities. I brought Doug Arthur here 3 years ago to be able to work on the whole idea of linking all of our resources.
Rebuttal?
Well, I am glad that you admit that you have a zero attendance record, and yet you want to name 4 large businesses where you attend their meetings, and you have your focus set with your monthly meeting at the GMC or JMC. I get that. But if you want to talk about the 1,500 jobs, ladies and gentlemen, I will be meeting with the business owners that create those jobs to find out what their needs are for employees. Second of all, had we been doing all these things, and you mentioned workforce development, I guess we wouldn't have 1,500 jobs available. What we have done for the past 28 years is imported poverty, not imported prosperity.
All right, we'll continue with question 4, which will be for Mr. Cheney. Please explain your thoughts on the rental registration and its impact on renters, investors, and the community as a whole.
First and foremost, the mayor's proposed legislation to City Council is very questionable whether or not it violates your Fourth Amendment rights. To mandate that an individual from the city can automatically come into your residence to conduct an internal inspection when government isn't participating in paying your rent, you're paying your rent at 100% level. I think that's wrong. Let's look at the financials of this. He wants to charge the landlords $25 per property to register their property and then charge them a $75 fee to do an internal inspection. I just told all of us here a few minutes ago that our poverty level was up to 32% in Lima. Home ownership is at 45%. That means 55% of our residents are renting their properties. If you have a poverty level of 32% and the median household income based on 2016 dollars is minus $4,000 per household, and you're going to add another $100 a month onto their rent, how are they going to pay that? I already feel for those that are struggling and that need a hand. We don't need to put more weight upon their shoulders. And you know what? It's time that we take a different approach with landlords. You want to do code enforcement, you want to continue to fine them. That hasn't gotten us anywhere. I look at the conditions of our houses. I look at some of our rental conditions. I would take a more positive approach, a friendly business approach. And I'm sure that's what they understand because they have been very supportive of my campaign.
Well, I should just note that Mr. Cheney didn't answer the question. He simply criticized my proposal. And I should also note that in the spring, Mr. Cheney stated he was in favor of rental registration. But he never spelled out what that meant. So we did send a letter to Lima City Council proposing the idea of rental registration, which would include, as he just described, a $25 registration fee and $75 for inspections, but that is an annualized cost, not a monthly cost. So any assertion about raising people's rents $100 a month is outrageously wrong. The fact is that we have some good landlords and some not so good landlords. In fact, some abusive landlords. We need actually to recognize, we need to have a rational discussion around this. And Mr. Cheney's doing his utmost, along with some landlords, to make certain that that rational discussion can't happen. In fact, my friend Mike Bloss wrote in the paper this past weekend that council should do nothing. We should just let the free market reign. Well, you know, this community has touted that as the idea forever, that private property is sacrosanct. If I had taken that attitude when BP intended to destroy the refinery, and there were folks that said the same thing, how dare you tell a company what they can do with their asset? Well, it's not just their asset. It's the community's asset. And we did have a say about what was going to happen with that refinery. And thank God that we did, because this community would be bankrupt if we hadn't taken that on and won. And on this issue about...
I'm certainly glad that you mentioned the refinery, because I'm the only candidate sitting before you tonight that financially has helped that refinery by negotiating some very, very large multi-million-dollar contracts. So I'm glad you brought that up. Second of all, you're not at a town hall where you can just lay a statement out there and claim that some of our individuals don't read newspapers or watch television or listen to the radios. But you're not going to sit there and continually accuse me of things that are not happening. I'm not going to allow that to happen, and you're not going to say I didn't answer the question. I did. And you know what? Remember what I said. We will have a business-friendly relationship with landlords. I will have a registration. It will cost them nothing, but we will mandate that we have active phone numbers that goes to an individual, unlike today where they can go to some company or corporation, so that we can work with them on improving their properties and ultimately improving our housing in this city, which is in dire need of help.
Mr. Berger?
The idea of simply asking landlords to give you their phone number will achieve nothing. It will achieve nothing. So we shouldn't be foolish about this. We need to recognize that there in fact are, we have an aging housing stock that needs to be taken care of. We have some landlords who do a good job of that and some landlords that don't. And we have asked City Council to engage in a discussion about this. We've been specific in what we were recommending, but ultimately, as the mayor, I don't get to decide. It's ultimately up to City Council to decide what are the specifics that we want in terms of how we intend to regulate this portion of our community. And I believe it's reasonable to suggest that it involve inspections of some sort. Should it be every landlord every year? Maybe not. Maybe it should just be landlords that have proven themselves to be irresponsible.
It is evident and apparent.
We've already had our rebuttal.
I don't have a rebuttal.
Not on that one, yes. We're ready for question number 5. Just so you know, both of you are welcome to make notes for your closing statement if that adds to your communication at the end. Mr. Berger, the success of the mayor is in part attributed to the ability to attract and keep professional staff. If reelected, what changes do you see in working with your current staff or in selecting new staff?
Well, I have been absolutely blessed over the entire time that I've been in office to have terrific staff, some of whom have been veterans of the previous administration, and some of whom were entirely new to the city. When I was originally elected, I took out an ad in the paper and I interviewed for folks, and at least half of those that ultimately I appointed, I had no prior knowledge of. And we were able to, in fact, attract good people, great skills, and ultimately put a team together that has, in fact, demonstrated its value for these last 28 years. Even when we've had retirements, I've been able to find people that ultimately have performed in exceptional ways. Hardworking, dedicated, thoughtful, caring people who, in fact, have made a real difference in the city organization and in the community as a whole. So, if I'm reelected, I intend to continue to work with that team. I believe we deliver real value to our community every day. We get up every day, we go to work, we work hard, and I think we've made positive changes on behalf of our community as a team.
Mr. Cheney, in this question, they're really focusing on who you might see as potential staff and the qualities you will look for in those individuals.
I appreciate this opportunity because the mayor and his campaign staff has been putting fear into the employees of this great city of Lima by telling them that I'm going to terminate all of them. Well, that absolutely is not true. Number one, the vast majority of our employees are protected by civil service, of which I deeply respect. Number two, I will have an open opportunity for all current staff to apply for that position. And quite frankly, I'm sure in the end, I won't replace all of them. But you know, I do have faith in our citizens to be able to provide quality individuals, unlike Dave Berger. Upon announcing Amy Odom's retirement, and I quote his words verbatim at his news conference, "There is, in my view, no one locally who has the skills and technical background needed for this position. So we'll be advertising this position in the coming months. No one locally has the ability of being the director of code enforcement." There are individuals that live in the city of Lima that own some of our largest companies that are very successful individuals. There are many well-educated individuals. I have faith in the citizens of Lima, and we will have an administration that is friendly, accountable, and responsible to do their due diligence and to do their jobs in a friendly manner. And this city will become known not only throughout Northwest Ohio, but throughout the state as the city you want to live in and do business in.
When the comment that my opponent quotes is accurate, and it was true. I didn't just hire a replacement to head code enforcement. I hired a replacement to head up our community development department, which is a technical job requiring experience dealing with federal regulations and federal grant programs. We had no one that applied locally that had those credentials. So we took out an ad. I interviewed as many folks as applied and ultimately selected a person who in fact had those credentials and who had worked in several communities doing exactly this kind of work. There's, again, I've been very blessed to have people come to the city of Lima, want to work with the administration, and have appreciated their talents.
Mr. Cheney, a response?
I do have. It just befuddles me that you wonder why no one locally applied. It's because you told them they weren't welcome to apply. You give them the mindset they didn't qualify for that job by your own words. The complete opposite should have been said. Upon her retirement announcement, we should have congratulated her for her efforts for the city of Lima in the number of years, which were a vast number of years she served our city. And then we should have explained to the city what we're looking for and encouraged our own residents to apply. I find it awful hard to believe people in this city don't qualify to do that job when I know they do.
As we move into question number 6, it'll be addressed to Mr. Cheney first. There's a lot of interest in this question. I probably have almost 15 cards on the topic. Explain your thoughts on the right to work laws and how they should affect our community.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of interest in this room because, and let's go back to the parade a minute since we're going to talk about right to work, and that is a major concern of union. And by the way, I have many good union friends. I didn't disrespect the Labor Day parade. They came up and inspected my unit, and they approved it. But the rules were, Mr. Berger, it was to be non-political except for your own unit. And quite honestly, you provided your campaign signs and put them on every single political or union vehicle that come in the parade. That's not disrespecting the American worker. But let me talk now about the question. Contrary to what you may think, both of my grandfathers were union members. They made a nice living and they provided for the family. My father was a union member. He served 29 years on our Allen County Sheriff's Department, first starting in the blue unit and then through promotions moving into the gold union of ASCA. So don't ever think that I'm anti-union, because quite frankly, I'm not. I believe there is a place and time for everybody. Do I have a problem with right to work? No. It is a case where let's everybody work together. I'm not going to hinder somebody because they're in a union. Absolutely not. Quite to the contrary. And quite honestly, there are many, many skilled tradesmen in our community, of which in business I use throughout our state. They do a wonderful job, as there are independent contractors that do a wonderful job. Open up the bidding process and you evaluate what you're going to get for your money.
Mr. Berger?
The local unions requested those signs. Simple as that. They asked for the signs and we provided them to them. As to right to work is wrong. It's as simple as that. Right to work is wrong as a policy, as public policy. If you take a job in an organization, we have both union and non-union organizations in our community. I tout them both all the time. Procter & Gamble is a non-union shop. Ford is a union shop. If you take a job at Ford and you're agreeing to those terms, you're getting compensation and wages, benefit that have been negotiated by the union. You should not have a right, after you have made the bargain to take the job, to suddenly repudiate the union. Right, and that's what right to work means. It means giving workers the opportunity to, in effect, divorce the union after they've had the benefits of that job. So my very public position is those who want to promote right to work are in fact eroding the quality of life of our citizens and the prosperity of businesses that they partner with. So I'm very clear. This is not something that we should be heading for in the state of Ohio, and I believe that both can exist in our community, and we should be fostering both.
All right, we're moving into question number 7, and Mayor Berger, this addressed to you first. Are the perceptions of the problems with crime, hard drug use, and poverty in Lima real? If so, how do you plan to address this?
Those issues of crime, drugs, poverty are all real issues. I mean, there is fundamentally no community, urban community, that doesn't have those issues. But we also have teams of people that are working on them. When you look at the issues of crime in our community, from 2008 to 2016, crime was reduced by 23%. And this year alone, we're down what we forecast to be another 13%. So the trend for the last decade has been positive and substantial in improving the safety of our community. When we look at the issues of drugs, my God, Ohio has been swamped, and that includes Lima. We have been swamped with the opioid addiction problem and overdose problem. But I believe that we have, through the Opioid Action Commission, a whole team of people, organizations in our community that are working every day to make a difference on this, from a law enforcement perspective and from a healthcare perspective and from a public education perspective. On the issues of poverty, poverty is solved with work. And that's what we're doing in our community. We are focused on creating jobs and getting people trained to be able to take those jobs. In addition to that, we obviously have lots of people that need assistance of various sorts. Everything from transportation. You know, the other day I was talking with somebody and learned that we have 1,000 people in wheelchairs in the city. Now, how do those people get transported when they need to go places? So there are real needs, real opportunities for people to...
Thank you.
You know, you've done a masterful job at attempting to trick the public with your campaign rhetoric of crime being down 30% since 2008. Dave Berger, you became mayor in 1989. How do you subjectively pick a year, 2008? High crime year? Absolutely it was. But let's look at most recently, 2016, of which through the public records request, I received the uniform crime report from the Lima Police Department. These are not my numbers, they're theirs. Serious crime is up 10% in 2016 over 2015. In 2016, we set a record, a 10-year record for murders in this city. Shootings continue daily in this city. Just look at the police records. They put them in the newspaper. So we have a serious crime problem. And the way you address it is, first of all, supporting the police department. Not having a SWAT team that doesn't have proper equipment, so they're not out there working for a year. A detective bureau staffed at the 1950s level. You know, we also look at drugs, and our drug dealers are controlling our streets of Lima. Drugs attribute directly to the crime problem that we have here in Lima. And when I become mayor, there will be a new guy in town that will work daily with the Lima Police Department, as my duty as mayor, spelled out by the city charter, and I will protect the citizens of Lima, and I will make your neighborhood safe. Poverty, unquestionable. I gave you United States Census Bureau records. We have increased poverty in this city to 32%. That is unacceptable, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Berger.
Mr. Cheney has asserted throughout this campaign that we're at 1950 levels of police department manning. That's not true. In the 1950s, we had 57 officers, and we had 7.5 people in the Detective Bureau. We now have 82 officers, and we have 16 people in the Detective Bureau. We have made the safety services of our community the highest budgetary priority. Every single dime that people pay in income tax goes to fund just those two departments. You can't make safety services a higher priority than to spend all the income tax on that. And I believe we have done it effectively, and we are having a positive impact on the overall safety and the direction of things in our community.
Mayor Berger, you and I both know there are not 16 officers assigned as detectives in the Lima Police Department. That is the biggest misstatement I possibly have ever heard in any debate.
I said we have 16 officers.
Your administration advertised and went through a temporary agency to hire a temporary detective. That's not staffing a police department. And the authorized strength of our police department is 107 officers. You are not at full strength. You're not at full strength based on what Chief Martin said his full strength level would be at 92 officers. You just said we're at 87. And I don't believe that number includes the individual that just left the Lima Police Department, unfortunately, to go to another city and work, or the individuals that, unfortunately, we will probably lose in the very near future.
Thank you. Mr. Cheney, the next question is for you. We touched a little bit on finances a minute ago. What are the city's biggest financial challenges, and how will you address them if elected?
Well, I think the city's biggest financial is it's no different than business. You have income and you have expenditures. And I will say that the city has done well to have, at one time, recently, an $8 million carryover. However, I mind you, that's at the expense of not hiring police officers like we should have hired them. That's at the expense of unsafe playground equipment, which is not my statement. That was a statement from the city administration. But amazingly, in an election year, we're going to get a bunch of brand new playground equipment. Unfortunately, we don't appear to be getting the police officers that we should have to work our streets and to make our city safe. So I think that it is in the budget, you evaluate it on a line item basis. And, you know, if you look at what this current administration has done with salaries, unbelievable the percentage of increase in salaries over the past number of years. And yet we have a poverty level of 32% and a household median income at $4,000 less than 1989. So I am, quite frankly, what was termed in business as a budget hawk. I evaluate the expenditure of every dollar, but I will never, ever, to save a dollar, put our citizens at risk. Nor will I, like my opponent twice, supported raising your city income tax. I will never support a city income tax. Never. Raise.
Mr. Berger?
Well, Mr. Cheney just demonstrated his support for the Tea Party. And that wrong-headed approach for public policy, I think, is naive. I have supported income tax proposals because we had needs. And because the public then said no, we moved on and found other ways to address issues in the city. When there are needs, you have to develop real proposals for how you're going to solve them. You can't just make up stories about how you're going to balance the budget. I have balanced with my team, we have balanced the budget every year in good times and in bad. And we built the city's financial strength to really an unprecedented level.
You know, I wondered how long it was going to take.
Actually,
And it took. I don't get a rebuttal? I get a rebuttal.
well, hold on just a second. We need to, I told you at the front end, I occasionally make some mistakes. So let me backtrack a second and see where we're at. The question was, started with yourself, Mr. Cheney, correct?
Yes.
And we had a, yep. Okay, so we have a rebuttal from you, and then we'll come back to Mayor Berger. My mistake. Thank you.
I thank you, Doctor. I wondered how long it would take before we would get into politics instead of what's really important about this campaign and about our city. But it took us 55 minutes. So, yes, I am a Republican. This is a non-party race, the same as Dave Berger is a Democrat in a non-party race. But I have a record of working with Democrats, and I have worked with 5 of the Allen County Democrat chairmen through my career at the Allen County Board of Elections, and I'm proud to say some of the finest individuals I've ever worked with, whether it was in politics or business. And we never, ever had the first problem, the first debate, or the first argument. You see, I have the ability to communicate. And you know, when you were in support of the income tax increase twice, your statement was, if it did not pass, this city would be broke. Well, you once again proved my philosophy, as you call it, that's business. When you don't have the monies, you make some cuts.
All right. Mr. Berger, your rebuttal.
Second rebuttal.
Oh,
Do I get a rebuttal?
nope, my error. I'll tell you what, I've got to get back on track here. And we're ready now to go to Mr. Berger for question number 9. Do you belong to any civic organizations or have you supported any social service agencies? What have you, with your desire to help others that is not directly in relationship to your occupation?
The kind I am involved in, I guess, in that regard, the Optimist Club. I'm involved in a member of a church. I have obviously relationships with many organizations in town in a variety of ways, with LACA, with the United Way, any number of social service organizations that I've worked with over the years. This is a community that when I first came to town, I ran a nonprofit housing development corporation for 13 years. I was responsible for actually organizing a number of the neighborhood associations in our community, and I have a real love for Lima as a place that where good people have deep roots and talents that they can bring to bear on behalf of our community. And so it has been a real pleasure for me over the years to work with a very diverse group of folks in our community trying to make a difference in the quality of life for everyone here.
Mr. Cheney?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Optimist Club because, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to tell you his commitment to our city. His salary at $130,000 a year is one of the largest salaries in our city and well above what the majority probably in this room make. But you know what? He pays his Optimist Club dues not out of his personal monies. He pays them out of his campaign funds. That's not commitment. I have been a member of the Lions Clubs International since I was 18 years old. Paid my own dues, by the way. And I currently serve on the board of directors of the Lima Locos. I know that I've served many of you some good popcorn and hot dogs at the concession stand. I've also volunteered for the American Cancer Society, actually 1 year chairing the Relay for Life. There are a number of other things that I have done, and my wife and I philanthropically have helped out many individuals that I would certainly never, ever bring to the attention of anyone. So I am committed to this community. I am committed to service, and that's why I'm asking for your vote for Mayor of Lima. I want to serve our city.
Mr. Berger?
Nothing further.
Mr. Cheney?
Nope. Thank you.
We'll move to question number 10 to Mr. Cheney. How do you propose to streamline the process between the City of Lima, the Township, and the County for construction of commercial projects?
Well, that goes back to changing our city. When it comes to zoning, when it comes to, excuse me, the different avenues that you have to go through establishing a business or remodeling your business. So I can answer that very simply. I have a wonderful relationship with every county-wide elected official. I have a wonderful relationship with the vast majority of township trustees. And so my plan will be very simple. We will create an environment where it's not business at the speed of government, it's government at the speed of business. I have met with a number of the townships, and I've heard their complaints about the way things currently are done and how it hinders them being able to progress and to grow their townships. And I've assured them that when I take office, we will make those changes so that they no longer have to struggle when they're trying to encourage businesses. Also, I believe that you must be very honest and upfront in business. You don't, after a business has already been built, subjectively walk up to them and say, oh, by the way, here's a $75,000 bill for a tap fee. And that was never ever discussed. You look at other instances where I know an individual that just recently expanded her business, and in the process of doing so, she was told that the cost of a tap would be many, many $1,000s more than she had negotiated for. Fortunately, she had it in writing. And to Mr. Caprella's credit, he looked at the contract, agreed with it, and she was given her proper rate. We have to change the way we do business.
Mr. Berger?
The city is an active partner. Otherwise, we would never have expanded our water system the way we have to the surrounding areas. The city is an active partner with the private sector, and we are continuously in discussion with project sponsors and developers. We provide the plans review and other services for building department, a state building department, which actually covers most of Allen County. And through that, we don't enforce our code, we enforce the state's code. And that requires a good deal of attention to customer service, trying to work through issues with the professionals involved, and ultimately get to the point where a project can in fact happen. We have development happening all over Allen County, not because it's accidental, but because there are people actively engaged every day in order to make that happen. So, can there be an issue like Mr. Cheney just referenced in terms of a misunderstanding? Certainly. And we work through that. And we look to find solutions. Without that kind of a focus, we would never have built the economy that we currently have. I appreciate the partnerships that we have with the county, the partnerships that we have with our townships, with the private sector. If we weren't working together as well as we are, our economy would not be blossoming as it is.
Rebuttal, Mr. Cheney?
Well, I don't necessarily call rebuttal, but he mentioned customer service. Let me tell you one thing I'm going to do. For any of you in this room that has had to have an inspection based on anything you've done to your business, or your home, you understand that you operate off of the city's time. And a lot of times that's extremely inconvenient to you. In a Keith Cheney administration, we will have a 24/7, 365 inspection department at no higher cost, because we'll implement a business plan that I've used for years, and that's called flex time. So we will do everything humanly possible to assist you in wanting to build your business and expand in our city.
Mr. Berger?
I don't think I need to respond to that.
We will proceed to question
Pretty good plan.
number 11. It will be directed to Mr. Berger. Do you feel the Civil Service Board is truly needed? If so, why?
Well, civil service it's not a question of how I feel about it. It's part of the city's charter. So it's essential that we work with it. At the same time, there have been changes, and I have requested more changes to allow that process to open up to diversify our workforce. I have asked, I continue to ask that the Civil Service Board and City Council adopt a rule that would allow us to hire from the complete list of those who successfully pass those tests. The fact is that we've now got what was called a rule of 3 has been changed to a rule of 10, and that change did help us a little bit, and we were able to increase minority participation in the city workforce from 7 to 10%. But it's not enough. We continue to discourage people from taking the tests by virtue of this set of rules. And we need to have rules that allow us to literally interview and talk with every successful candidate, not just a small portion of them. When we can only talk to a small portion, that means the vast majority of people on those lists never hear from us because we don't have their names. We don't even know who has passed. And consequently, then the rumor mill gets started. Well, I took the test, but they never called me. That's right, because we can't. The rules prevent us. So the Civil Service Board is a necessity, but the rules need to be changed in order to allow the kind of diversification of our workforce that we need in order to reflect the composition of our community.
Mr. Cheney?
Talking about the rule of 3 and now the rule of 10, you attacked me earlier and falsely accused me of not following the rules. But let's talk about rules, and this is public record. Most recently, you hired an individual in this city that was number 20 on the list. Now, how do you get from 10 to 20 if you're following the rules? Look, I believe in the city charter. I believe that there is certainly a place for it. Do I think there are some changes that need to be made? Certainly. But I think it's like every evolving document. That's why we have amendments to the United States Constitution in America. Because as times change, we too need to change and adjust so that we continue to have an opportunity to grow and to be a better city. So as I go through the entire city charter, I am sure that I will be presenting to council, ultimately working with them to establish some changes that we then would take to the city voter. So there's one thing about it. I do believe you have to play by the rules, contrary to hiring a number 20 when they were not even qualified according to current rules.
Mr. Berger?
We did follow the rules. This was for a position of clerk in the police department, and because the police department had other hiring priorities, though the list had been produced by the Civil Service Board, the police department had other hiring priorities that actually delayed their consideration of the candidates on that list. By the time they got around to that list, more than 10 individuals took themselves out of consideration. They had already, it was some months later. So they had already moved on. So we hired, I believe, the person that was not number 20 but number 19, and we followed the rules. We didn't break the rules. We didn't bend the rules. We followed the rules.
Mr. Cheney?
Well, first of all, you said something very key. Months later, we hired the individual that was actually needed months ago. That's the problem I'm talking about today with the Lima Police Department. I'll tell you, I have so much respect for our men and women that actually put their lives on the line to protect you and me on a daily basis, considering the fact of how undermanned that department is. And I know what I'm going to hear. Well, the chief said we're at full staff when he hired the last 5 officers, which, by the way, are in school. They're not on the streets. And no, that is not full staff by any means. So, look, you didn't follow the rules, and it's that simple.
Okay, we'll move on to question number 11. I will make a note that it is 8:11. I indicated we would go to about 8:20 prior to having closing remarks, so we have probably a couple more questions, depending on the speed at which we go through them. This question is for you, Mr. Cheney, first. If elected or re-elected, will you keep community-oriented policing substations adequately staffed, and how will it be paid for?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, they're currently not adequately staffed now. We have 3 very, very good officers assigned to 5 substations. We continue just opening substations. I guess it's a campaign year, and I do understand that part of it. But community policing, when done correctly and addresses current problems, can be a very active and successful tool. Do I currently agree with the way we're doing community policing? No. If you're in a building and you want people to come in and, I guess in slang term, rat somebody out, I doubt if they're going to walk into the building. If that was a successful practice, our crime rate would be way down, because that building called the Lima Police Department on Market Street has been there for a number of years. That isn't the way you get it done. In the old days, we used to call it walking the beat. And if you want to know how I'm so familiar with policing, because my grandfather was a sheriff, my father was a sheriff, so I pretty well grew up in a law enforcement family, as well as my mother was deputized. So I fully understand law enforcement, and I will bring to our police department a very, very unique program that will be community policing. That's something like we've never seen in Lima before. And then I'll ask you, judge that program and look at our crime rate. I know it'll be successful, because where they're using it today, it's very successful.
Mr. Berger.
Community policing works here in Lima, and it's making a difference. We do have 5 substations. We have 3 officers that that work out of those locations in the neighborhoods surrounding them. They're not sitting in that office with their feet up waiting on folks to come in. They're out knocking on doors. They're out with our community navigator from Coleman responding to overdose situations. They're, in fact, connecting with people to define the quality of life issues that are happening in their neighborhoods, and then bringing solutions to that. Community policing works because it's based upon building positive relationships with law-abiding folks in neighborhoods where we need them. These 5 locations have been defined by the kind of activities, both nuisance and law enforcement issues going on in those areas. We placed them in places that needed to have that kind of attention. And then they help coordinate the activities of the other uniformed officers. They feed information to those officers to make sure that the patrols that are taking place, in fact, are following up on real issues in those areas. This teamwork approach is making a difference. It's reducing crime in our community, and it's building a sense of safety that I hear all the time from folks that are neighbors to those locations, how much they appreciate the reinvigoration and the reestablishment of this initiative.
Mr. Cheney?
Well, we're back to reducing crime when we know what happened in 2016, and you mentioned the drug problem. You know, unfortunately, in 2015, in Lima, we had 18 deaths attributed to overdose. In 2016, we had 36. And as we said in this room tonight, sadly, we've had 30 so far this year. That would project out to be 43. So we've not addressed the drug problem. My opponent's answer was to blame the doctors and the dentists. Well, you know what? My wife and I have attended the funerals and the visitations of some pretty good young people who ate the needle, played with the devil, and they lost. We must stop the supply. It's called supply and demand. And then offer also for those that want treatment. My good friend, my doctor buddy, does it all the time. He's walked out of many dinners we've been at because somebody decides they want to get clean.
Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Mr. Berger?
There's no question that the opioid epidemic is here. And the medical community has begun, frankly, to take some ownership of and change the prescription habits that they, frankly, were hoodwinked into adopting by the pharmaceutical companies. The kinds of people that get hooked on pharmaceuticals ultimately then go to the street. And so the interventions that are happening in our community, both from an educational standpoint, from a treatment standpoint, from a law enforcement standpoint, are going to take time, but they are in place and folks are working on it. St. Rita's just added additional beds. Coleman has added treatment beds. All of that takes time to put in place, and it's really only been since the middle of last year as the Opioid Commission got underway and everybody began to team around this set of issues.
Okay, this will be our last question of the evening prior to individual statements at the end. We're going to go back to the neighborhood roots. What are your plans for motivating the citizens of Lima to do more volunteerism in our neighborhoods to help make Lima a more safe and attractive environment to live? And it would be for you, Mr. Berger.
Well, I believe that our continuing partnership with the neighborhoods is vital. And so we continue to provide resources. We continue to try to find new opportunities for them to develop additional programs. One of those is done in conjunction with Activate Allen County. It's focused on wellness. It's focused on the issues of community gardens and healthy eating. Those are things that I think will make a difference as we continue to grow those sites around the community, teach folks about not just gardening, but also the preparation and canning, canned goods and the like. Lost arts for many folks. I also believe that with our neighborhood associations, there are opportunities to create partnerships between them and our schools. Bringing children together with those neighborhood activities will also energize the participation in those neighborhood associations as programs are developed for children, making sure that families, in fact, have opportunities to either have education or leisure time activities built around neighborhood settings. My sense as well is that connecting neighborhood associations to philanthropic resources, connecting them to grants, foundations, and the like, just as when I brought resources back from the U.S. Conference of Mayors, money also helps. And the opportunity to do things in a creative way, to marshal people, get their attention focused on what are their needs, and then how do we marry that to the resources that are available.
Mr. Cheney?
You know, there are numerous things, but as the good book prescribes, it should be neighbor helping neighbor. And we certainly haven't done enough of this in our community. To the 4 active neighborhood associations, they volunteer. I've witnessed it and I'm very thankful. A number of individuals, as we described earlier, volunteer through their local social organizations or through their service clubs. And I deeply respect that when you pay your own dues. And I will say that volunteerism comes through the church. Government can help it. But you know, the reality is this. We have to offer hope in this community. We have to come together, and when we see something that needs done, go do it. I wouldn't bring this up, but the individual actually serving overseas in Afghanistan made it public on Facebook that I've mowed his yard for his wife while she's been gone and done other things for their family. I never brought that up. I didn't tell my own horn, but I'm going to say it tonight because that is what I want to encourage. I want to encourage neighbor helping neighbor. Let's get back to the way things used to be in that respect, when individuals respected each other because they had hope, they had prosperity, and they felt good about themselves and they wanted to help others. That will be an attitude that we foster throughout my administration.
Nothing further.
Mr. Cheney, any other last rebuttal?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. I'll give the candidates a couple of seconds here to kind of formulate their thoughts for their closing 2-minute summary. It will be based on our flow, Mr. Cheney first, followed by Mr. Berger. I want to make a couple of observations quickly. Thank you for your attendance this evening, for your respect for the candidates and their efforts and their individual thoughts. I want to remind you about November 7th, right? Tuesday, November 7th, the night to vote. Yeah. And then October 4th is the next event for these 2 fine candidates. I'll have one other remark after our closing comments. Mr. Cheney?
Thank you. Initially, I want to thank LACNIP and certainly St. Luke's Church, Dr. Kinkley, and all of the individuals, whether you are here to support me or my opponent. Thank you for attending tonight because this is a portion of democracy at work. It didn't take my opponent long to attack me tonight, but I guess that's why they call it debate. But you know, my parents raised me and my brothers in a loving Christian and home and taught us by example the values of rewards of hard work, the virtues of ethics and honesty, to give back to our community through service and the true value of family. I want to thank my mom and my lovely wife Jan and my entire family who's with me here tonight. It's been with me every step of this campaign. I'm a candidate for mayor for one simple reason. I want to build a better Lima for all, to be inclusive, to include everybody, and to provide opportunity for everybody. I was truly hurt on April 11th of this year when State Senator Steve Schiavone, a Democrat candidate for governor, was in Lima and said this to our media. Just driving in here today, I like to look and see with my own eyes what's going on in the community. I've noticed that Lima is similar to Youngstown in the fact that you've lost a lot of population over the last 20 years, You have a lot of abandoned properties and blight, which causes for unsafe communities. The Senator's observation was right on the money. In 2016, serious crime had a 10% increase. We set a 10-year record for murder. We look at poverty. We've already discussed those numbers. It's up to 32%, and we've lost 8,000 residents. It's time for change. As your mayor, I will rebuild Lima into a thriving Midwest city that we can all be proud to call home. I will aggressively address crime. To the voters of Lima, I respectfully ask you to vote Keith Cheney for mayor, a vote that will be the start of rebuilding Lima into a shiny city on the hill. May God bless all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Mr. Berger?
Well, thank you all for taking the time tonight to attend and participate in this event. Again, thank you to LACNIP, to St. Luke's for hosting us here. I've had the privilege for 28 years to serve as the city's chief executive. It has been a job that I have thoroughly relished every day. It's a job that demands from me the best that I can deliver. I've been blessed as well to work with a team of people who I respect and who have brought real talents to our community and work with all the rest of the city employees and others in our community in order to rebuild a town that truly was, as a result of the Rust Belt losses, back on its heels. I just think that we need to appreciate how far we've come. Certainly we have lots to do, but we have come far in terms of the kind of losses that we had suffered. At one point, we lost 8,000 industrial jobs in the early 90s. It was a defense downsizing. I mean, when you lose that kind of economic input to your community, it takes you years. It takes decades to overcome that. And we have done that. We are now literally in an economy that most of us have not seen, if you're over 40, you haven't seen for over 40 years. And if you're not over 40, you've never seen it at all. So I really think we need to appreciate how far we've come, and we've done it together. And we're doing it on a continuous basis. The renewal that's going on in downtown Lima is incredible. The projects coming out of the ground right now are terrific, and they're game changers for our community. We need to continue to move Lima forward, and I look forward to continuing to help make that happen. And would appreciate your vote in November. Thank you.
Let's two things. One, LACNIP will have this recorded. It will be a link on their website from which you can review tonight's conversation if you choose. Secondly, I always like to end this event with applause for both candidates because I think they both represented themselves well and the community of Lima. Thank you. That's all. Have a good evening.